So we move on to the final 2 points, and these are areas I'm not competent in, so I'm just giving you the evidence as being reported in the literature, and these are areas that people might find interesting. So I've called this the big coronary artery histology fraud, and I learnt it from Vladimir Subotin, who's in remarkable shape for a man in his 60s, and as you can see, he's a champion bodybuilder, a weightlifter, general exerciser. So he's prepared to take on the world because he's got the muscles to fight it. And in his article that has been the most popular for me to read, he writes that excessive intimal hyperplasia in human coronary arteries before intimal lipid deposition is the initiation of coronary atherosclerosis and constitutes a therapeutic target. Now, here is some of the evidence which he presents, which I've called the great histology fraud. So here's a diagram, and I think this one comes from Encyclopedia Britannica, and on the left it shows a normal coronary artery, and on the right, or normal artery, and on the right it shows an artery that's invaded by coronary atherosclerosis. And so the key point is that there's an acellular space between the endothelium, which is here, and the tunica media, which is the muscular layer. And the muscular layer, as you can see, has got multiple layers of cells, muscle cells, but below the endothelium, there's no cells. So it's an acellular space. That's what the diagram says. And just to confirm that the tunica intima is the endothelium plus the subendothelial space, and the tunica media is the muscular layer. So that's what the textbooks show. And that is what is used to explain how atherosclerosis develops. In other words, the cholesterol invades, crosses the endothelium, because the endothelium becomes inflamed for some reason. The cholesterol accumulates in the subendothelial space, which is considered to be an open space just waiting for the invasion of cholesterol. So here's a diagram showing here's the endothelium, here's the subendothelial space, which is the tunica intima. There's the endothelium, here's the tunica intima. The subendothelial space, which is largely acellular according to this theory. Then you have the internal elastic lamina, and then you have the tunica media, which is the muscle cells. And here's what's going to happen, that the cholesterol is going to enter and cause the atherosclerotic plaque, and the plaque is going to progress. And again, can you see that the tunica intima is just an open space waiting to be invaded? So what Dr. Subotin did was he looked at work by Dr. Nakashima and his colleagues, where they looked at normal coronary arteries, and guess what? They found that the normal coronary arteries, the tunica intima is large. It's at least as large and as cellular as the tunica media. So here we have in all these diagrams, you can see the tunica infima is thicker than the tunica media. This is not an acellular space. And therefore the question becomes, well, how does cholesterol squeeze between these cells to cause coronary atherosclerosis? So in human coronary arteries prone to coronary atherosclerosis, the tunica intima is at least as cellular as the tunica media. So how does blood cholesterol squeeze in between, its way between these cells to initiate coronary atherosclerosis? Nakashima continued their research, and they did coronary artery histology and staining of numbers of people who had died, and they then looked at their coronary arteries to see how does the coronary atherosclerosis develop. So the top figure, the top column, the top row is of a healthy normal coronary artery. The second is one that has developed fatty streaks, and the third is grade 2 fatty streaks. And so what you see again is that the intima is thicker than the media, And the first event that occurs is that lipid starts to accumulate deep in the intima. And that progresses, as you can see here in the fatty grade 2 fatty streak. There's more lipid, but the lipid is accumulating deep in the intima, not at the surface, which is where it should be accumulating if the cholesterol is coming directly across the endothelium. And then macrophage accumulation is also a factor in this disease, and the arrows indicate that the macrophages are pretty absent in the first 3 stages. But as the disease progresses, you can see more and more lipid accumulates, and now it starts to progress towards the luminal side of the artery, and you can see the macrophages are accumulating. So the conclusion is that atherosclerosis develops deep in the intima, not at the surface air level. And so Subbotin comes up with his own hypothesis of what's happening, and again, this is hypothetical, and what he says that the cells in the tunica intima start to proliferate and grow for whatever reason. They are stimulated to grow. Ultimately, they outgrow their blood supply and they become hypoxic, and that causes the ingrowth of arteries from the vasa vasorum, and that then causes the atherosclerotic plaque. And the point of this is that there has to be a better explanation than we have if the intima is so large and it has been ignored by histologists who have written out the fact that the tunica intima has many cells. So he concludes that the consensus hypothesis on coronary atherosclerosis suggests high LDL cholesterol levels as the major cause and pursues it as a therapeutic target, i.e. by using statins, explicitly assuming, 1, that the tunica intima of human coronary arteries consists of only one cell layer, the endothelium, situated on a thin layer of scarcely cellular matrix. And secondly, that subendocardial lipoprotein retention initiates the disease. However, the facts that he presents show that the normal tunica intima invariably consists of multiple cellular layers, and secondly, that initial lipid depositions occurred in the deepest layers of the tunica intima. This review suggests that coronary atherosclerosis starts with pathological intimal expansion resulting in intimal hypoxia and neovascularization of adventitial vasa vasorum, facilitating lipoprotein extraction by previously avascular deep intimal tissues. And so that's the hypothesis, and my point is that it's really interesting that the conventional explanation of how coronary atherosclerosis develops has to falsify the true histology